Okay, so now I'm going to blindside Eric with a question he wasn't expecting.
Okay.
Do you think that comics are about to enter a dark phase? I mean, are comics about to hit a downturn?
In terms of sales or creativity?
Sales and maybe creativity a little bit. Like, I felt like 3 or 4 years ago we were in kind of a golden age of indie comics. And I'm not sure that that's momentum is still going. Like, maybe all of the really good indie comics are already out there being done. And some of them have failed and ended, and some of them are still like going on and on, like Lazarus and Saga. But I don't know if the indie comics cup is being replenished or whether it's kind of stagnating a little bit. And one reason I thought of that is because everyone's like on the internet examining really closely Marvel comic sales. But while looking at that, I see that several years ago everyone was noticing how every time image sales were creeping up, but now image sales have gone down a bit. They're not bad, but they are now like 9% of the market, but for a while they were 12% of the market.
Oh, I did not know that.
And anyway, I was just wondering if you had a sense of like, are indie comics kind of stagnating a bit after this incredible... I mean, you can't always be blooming endlessly with it. But maybe it's just me. Maybe that's just what I'm perceiving at the moment.
Do you think maybe it's because there are so many publishers though putting out material and
Right.
causing a fragmentation of the market,
As
opposed to
right.
a reaction to lesser quality, perhaps?
There is that, because, you know, like recently there's been incredible numbers of really good comics from Aftershock, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I feel like recently Dark Horse has upped their game and has more good comics. Like you and I, we did a podcast on your, which I will link to, Longbox Review Podcast, where we talked about our top 5 indie comics of the year, and at least one of them was Dark Horse. We both loved Black Hammer.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And other Dark Horse comics are pretty high up for me. But yeah, a lot of great stuff from Aftershock, and I feel like there's some other ones out there. So it used to be more focused on image, maybe.
Right.
But still, this diffuseness could be hurting the market too.
Perhaps.
The market for indie comics. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, can it sustain? Is it sustaining? Oh, wrong cup. That's my empty cup.
Sustainable. Well, that's something that I've often feared, is that because the number of units being sold for a successful comic these days, you know, is what, 50, 60,000? Even for
That's
Marvel
a
and
really
DC?
successful comic.
Yeah.
50, 60.
Where it used to be, you know, 100,000 or 200,000. And so I've long been concerned about that.
Right. I think a successful indie comic right now is considered like maybe 15,000.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of them are much lower than that. Much lower than that.
But conversely, you have there's so much out there. So despite the fact that there are low unit sales, perhaps 15,000, whatever that happens to be, creators are still putting stuff out there. People are still buying it.
Right.
So maybe it's not as bad as we think.
People are buying it, but in enough numbers. But also, another thing we don't know is the trade numbers, and maybe the indie comics are
yeah, you're right.
selling well enough in trade.
That's funny you say that, because I was discussing with one of the creators at Rose City yesterday. I think it was the guy who sold me the Sentinels trades, where he was saying that the trade sales have been just fantastic.
Right.
So maybe that plays a lot into it, and there's also the digital sales.
Right.
You know,
and so all we fans know are the diamond direct market sales, and those may not be a good picture of things.
Yeah.
But I have this slight feeling that the indie market is just not generating as much heat as it used to.
Well, it might be. Yeah.
And I worry that there's a bit of a downturn, and I feel like I feel like maybe starting with the point around when Saga first came out, there was a feeling, I think, from a lot of creators, now we can make our living off of doing indie comics.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, like, some things concern me, like Black Bolt, the comic book Black Bolt. I don't know if you read that.
I do not.
It's by the artist who was doing Odyssey, ODYC, by Matt Fraction. And it's like, why isn't he doing indie comics? Why is he working for Marvel? I hear Marvel doesn't even pay that well.
Or maybe they pay enough that it's that you gotta make a little bit of money, and
Right.
then go back to the thing that you really
Why
want to
is
work
Chip
on.
Zdarsky doing Marvel comics instead of spending more time on Sex Criminals and other indie comics?
Ostensibly because he's making more money, a better page rate.
But Sex Criminals has lines out the wazoo at the convention. And
Yeah.
It's,
But maybe-
I don't know.
maybe
So
that-
I feel like before people were leaving Marvel and DC to go to indie comics, but but it feels like I'm sensing coming back.
Well, it's like everything. Everything's cyclical, right?
Right.
So maybe the indie revolution is on a decline, a slight
Right.
decline.
Maybe, or maybe I've just made this up. Maybe it's just my imagination.
It's still an interesting point to ponder, though.
Right. Like Black Mask comics seemed really exciting, but I don't know if you're much aware of that, but are
Well,
you?
that's the company that puts out Black, right?
Yes, that's one
Yeah,
of the
that's one of the comics.
Yeah, one of many comics.
They
They do Space Riders, I think they're called. They do 4 kids go into a bank. They have a bunch of comics, but they've had a lot of problems actually releasing the comics.
getting them out. Yeah, that's
And
my
I
big
think
complaint.
they had all this hype 2 years ago. Everyone was really excited about them. I think people have kind of lost interest because they've kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
run into problems in production. I'm still real excited over Space Riders, but that's about the only one I'm now excited about. Before for a while I told my shop, just order me every Black Mask comic that comes out.
Oh.
And my shop totally failed to do that.
That
was too hard of a demand. I had to dig up the titles and tell them.
that is a failing on your shop's part for sure.
Well, my shop is struggling with learning how to do the direct market because until a year and a half ago, they just sold back issues and nothing else.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well-
and they're really nice, so I don't mean to put them down. But I think I thought that I could just tell them, get me every Black Mask comic and that would work, but it didn't work. But part of it is that the Black Mask comics hardly ever come out, so it's pretty hard for them to keep track of.
That's true. Yeah. It is one person or however many they choose
Right.
to actually enter the order. So
Yeah.
if they're not there, it's easy to miss. I mean, I have
Right.
trouble
They
doing
can't program their computer to
Just-
order it all.
yeah.
But it also seems like a lot of Image comics have been coming out less frequently, or maybe have faded away without any announcement. Do you follow Rumble?
I don't.
Like that seems to have gone away. I switched to trade waiting on that, but I bought either the second or third trade, whatever the most recent trade they did. Excuse me, burping now. But so yeah, I have this vague feeling that there's a bit of a decline there.
Decline, or is it just simply a matter of
Maybe it's a leveling out, and I'm
Oh,
viewing
yeah,
that as a
yeah,
decline
there you go.
because I was used to this climb.
yeah, or like we said, the margin for making a profit for these creators is really not as much as we think with
Right.
with the independent comics, and so they get into it with their passion projects and realize we need to make a little bit more money to pay the rent,
Right.
to feed our kids, etc. Right? So they've developed a certain cachet within the community, and therefore people like DC and Marvel will come calling and say, "Hey,
Right.
we know you
But-
you work on this, whatever this and this and this is, and we want you to work on like Chip Zdarsky,
Right.
Spectacular Spider-Man." So, come
But a
work with us
year
for-
ago, we heard Jonathan Hickman say that he sold millions of comics with Marvel and a small fraction of that of indie comics, and he was paid more for those indie comics.
That's true. Yeah.
And now there's a rumor he's going to be writing for DC.
God, I hope so.
And some people are fantasizing was it you?
Legion of Superheroes.
That he'll do the Legion of Superheroes, which would be really awesome.
It would be. I kind of think it's not going to happen.
Uh-huh.
But, it's nice to think about it.
Yeah, and I hope that he's still making more money from his indies, but I wonder if there's been a turnaround where people for a while were making more money from their indies than their corporate work, but now it's fizzling a little bit.
Maybe. Yeah.
But again, I'm being paranoid.
Well, just like I have been, I've been thinking in the back of my brain.
How are we doing?
Good.
Can I get you anything?
I'd like another glass of ruby.
Good for you?
I'm good. Thank you.
She wanted to be on a live video. Now she is.
Yeah. What was I saying?
Something about Jonathan Hickman or
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
authors coming back to.
I've long
the
been thinking
mainstream.
about how the comic industry is basically 2 years away from imploding totally,
Uh-huh.
and hasn't happened yet. So.
Well, the big danger is the shops going out of business because they rely too much on Marvel Comics sales, and Marvel's not doing well. And Marvel, there's hints that maybe Marvel's doing even worse than the numbers show,
That's true. Yeah.
because it's really a lot of unsold copies piling up at the shops.
Yeah, there's a lot of obfuscated numbers
Right.
involved in the comics game that.
And we're hearing a lot right now about Marvel Legacy, where they're playing all these games with their
Right.
lenticular covers and how many copies the people have to order for them. Thank you. Could I get another glass of water?
One more drink. Sorry,
No worries. Yeah. Would you like a glass of water?
I still have mine.
I'll be right
Thank you.
back.
This is real life. Not like his fake podcast.
Yeah. Totally don't listen to it.
Unless you want something a little better edited and more easy to listen to
I don't know about that.
and more focused. Do you
Laser-
feel like
laser
Marvel
focus.
could, I guess, there was a time when Marvel went bankrupt and it felt like the whole industry might die as we
Collapse,
know
yeah.
it. Now I don't think comics will die, because I think there'll be a book market for comics, even if the comic book store market dies.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy the monthly serialized comics, but I will still read comics if they go away. I'll just read them in a different form, I think.
Yes. Might be even, let's assume for a second that DC and Marvel implode. You're still going to have your independent publishers. Someone's going to be making.
See, there's the thing. When there was the implosion during the 90s, all the indie, or 90% of the indie publishers disappeared because there was nowhere for them to sell. The indie publishers, for the individual issues, need shops that are healthy. The shops will sell 100 Marvels and 15 indies, but those 15 indies are important for the indies.
Yes.
And so if Marvel
larger,
causes the shops to shrink,
yeah.
and those shops that remain to be more conservative, there's nowhere for the indies to sell their individual issues.
I'm not saying it won't be easy, but I think even if you have some sort of implosion like this, passionate people will get their product out there
Sure.
somewhere.
Well, and modern technology allows you to get your product out there without the corporations.
Exactly.
Or without the publishing corporations. You just need Apple and Google and but I think the bitter memories of the 90s implosion still affect the way I view everything. I might interpret things wrong because of that, or I might be right. My experience might show.
This is all speculation.
Because we were talking about that Chad's Attic show that I like a lot and that I was on, so I'm like nearly a star. No, No, Chad does a series of looking back 30 years at comics he bought that month 30 years ago. And there was all kinds of comic book companies that no longer exist then.
Right.
Comics then that no longer exist now. Like First Comics and Pacific and Eclipse.
Yeah.
And so we view, I mean, Image has lasted a long time and rode out the waves, but we view these, Oni and Dark Horse and Aftershock and possibly Image could all be the kinds of companies that disappear when there's a shrinking of the market. I think the ones that will survive best are the ones that have got more of a foothold in the regular book market. And maybe Image has. I mean, I think, like, one really noticeable thing when we were waiting for the Mike Allred panel, and the panel before it was a Bitch Planet panel, and a huge number of people poured out.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It was obviously a huge audience for the, and there's 3 or 4, well, there's 2 Bitch Planet panels and 2 more other Kelly Sue DeConnick panels at this con. But anyway, that drew such a huge audience on a comic that only has come out in single issues 2 or 3 times this year, I think.
Oh, really? It's been that few?
I think so. I don't know, because I'm not getting it in single issues anymore. But I think most of its fame is based on the book publications, the trades.
Yeah.
And I noticed when I was walking around the Artist Alley that there was this huge line leading up to Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky.
Yep.
And I think most of those readers are not. And that's another book that comes out very infrequently. I think most of those readers are based on the book edition. I'm not sure, but I think.
Well, based on what I've heard, the trade sales are bolstering the comic industry to some degree, at the very least. So,
well, and comics are something that sells for a month from the point of view of the retailer. I mean, we go and buy the back issues, but they don't. The publisher doesn't make money off of that. But a books could have sales, the long tail, as they call it, sales over many years. And each time another volume of Sex Criminals comes out, I bet the sales for the first volume of Sex Criminals spike. Because every time a new volume comes out of a book that's a serial book, it creates interest in the backlog of the other books. So you keep making money off of them over time.
Yeah.
Which is something that, until the early 2000s, comics did not even have that kind of thing. They really relied on the money. And of course, that's why we see everything being written for trades. But that's a whole nother bugaboo where I want more comics written for the comics and not for the trades. Okay, well, I think I've run that subject into the ground. If I think of anything else to blindside Eric with, I might record again.